Welcome to Don't Scare the Newbies, a podcast where we talk kink, raw and unfiltered. I'm Carizel, a lifestyle submissive in a 24/7 dynamic who likes their kink heavy, intense, and scary.
And I'm S, Carizel's dominant, who knows how to deliver all of the above.
And today we're going to be talking about consent and CNC, that's consensual non-consent, which is one of my absolute favourite topics.
Because you're a filthy, filthy pervert.
Yes, I am. So consent and CNC, consensual non-consent play, are both really big topics. And I think when I was planning sort of the order that we were going to do things in the podcast and what we were going to talk about, it would have been easy to kind of treat these as two separate ones, but I wanted to tackle them together because I feel like when you're talking about kink, at least, you can't really separate them off from each other. Not everyone who does kink will do CNC, but you can't talk about how consent works in kink without talking about the ways that people sometimes choose to modify it. And you definitely can't talk about CNC without talking about consent, because that is the foundation that really underpins all of it and is how you keep it safe and not traumatizing for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's that foundation for it, isn't it? Is what, as non-consenting as it might appear in the moment, there is all of that work that's gone on in the background, all of that discussion and negotiation, and a really clear statement from everybody involved that this is okay. This is what we're up to. Everybody has an understanding of what's going to happen, and they're happy with that.
Yeah.
Even though in the moment they will probably not be. At least some of the people involved will be having a deeply bad time.
Yes.
Which is kind of the point.
For me, at least, that is the point, and that's something that we'll talk about as well. How broad CNC can be and how levels of distress can be very sort of variable, and varying levels of whether that's real or performed, and lots of complexity to it. It's a very wide umbrella. But definitely, whatever style and whatever level of CNC we're talking about, the consent is the important part. The consent is the part that makes it ethical.
Yeah, I would agree. So shall we start there? A little bit of recap on consent.
Consent sounds like a really good place to start. Yes, it's the first C.
It is the first C in CNC. You are quite right. And we've talked about consent models in episode 3. But I think one of the fundamental things that I've found really interesting, thinking about how consent works in kink spaces and how consent works in the rest of the world, is that consent more often than not is an opt-in type of approach in kink, whereas in non-kinky sex or non-kinky spaces is almost like consent is an opt-out.
Yeah.
Everything's on the table unless you specifically say it isn't, whereas within a lot of kink dynamics and a lot of kink spaces, nothing is on the table unless you say it is.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really, when you say it out loud, kind of obvious, and you think, yeah, why does it not work like that everywhere? It's a really good way of kind of handling what can be really difficult things to negotiate and make sure that you're not risking damaging people by what you're doing.
Yeah. And when you think about it, it makes sense how it's ended up happening that way more for kinky people than it maybe does for the general population, because there's so much more on the menu with kink. There are so many more options. If you had more of an opt-out model, it would be very hard to kind of predict what your partner might choose to do to you within the huge range of things that exist within kink. Things that probably even neither of us have heard of would be options that someone might do to you if you hadn't discussed it. So having things be a lot more explicit and a lot more clear, where if you're having a vanilla hookup with somebody and you haven't had much of a conversation about what you do and don't like, but you both know that you're consenting to vanilla sex, you've both probably got a similar idea in your head about what that includes.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that people might still not have preferences or things that they don't want to do. You know, someone might not want to receive oral sex, for example, but then they would probably bring that up because you know going in what the set of expected activities is likely to be and what is likely to come up organically in that situation. So that's probably why those conversations don't feel quite as essential a lot of the time to people who aren't involved in kink.
Yeah, that's fair. And you're absolutely right. It does require a lot more thinking, doesn't it? The vast array of different types of kink, different types of people doing different kinky things it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
I suppose there's a risk element to it as well. Because the stuff that we do in kink is inherently riskier. So you need to kind of think about that a little bit more and have a deeper understanding, I suppose, of what it is you're about to go into. There are risks with perfectly vanilla missionary, but maybe not quite the same level as...
Certainly not the same variety of risks.
No.
I think, obviously, with sex, you've got things like sexually transmitted infections to think about, potentially pregnancy, but it's a shorter list of things that people generally, everyone has a pretty good amount of knowledge on, particularly people sort of who are of the generations that had sex education in school.
Yeah.
So, like, people my age and younger, I'd imagine your age as well, who would have had sex ed.
We had some version of sex ed. We learned what the words were, and that was about it.
So maybe not quite as reliable in your case then, but certainly, like, for my generation, we were getting taught in quite a lot of detail about infections and how you could protect yourself. Where with kink, not only are some of the risks significantly more serious, there are some kinks where one of the potential risks will be instant death. That's a big thing that you really need to talk about. But also the amount of different things that can go wrong is a lot more variable. Thinking about the luckily fairly minor injuries I've had from kink, I've had a ruptured eardrum. I've had a skin infection that was bordering on becoming cellulitis. I've had a much stronger reaction to nettles than I was expecting once, and I had really itchy feet for 3 days, which is not serious, but it is annoying. It is annoying as fuck. So those risks are so much wider, so much broader, even when they're not particularly serious ones, that I think it takes a little bit more communication and more specific consent to say, if I'm consenting to someone nettling me, that I'm consenting to potentially not being able to sleep for the next 3 days. It's not something you necessarily think about.
No, and I think that's an important aspect of a lot of the kind of the consent models that are used in kink, isn't it? Is understand you can't consent to a risk if you don't know what it is and you don't understand what the risk is and what the outcomes might be.
Absolutely.
So some of the more popular consent models, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, are safe, sane, and consensual. SSC is a fairly popular one, probably one of the older ones, been around for longer. As I think discussed in episode 3, we have some particular views about that. Kind of some of the stuff that we do isn't safe, isn't necessarily sane, but it is at least consensual. And if that's the kind of model that you want to use, that's fine. It's just that those first two are quite subjective words. And what's safe for me and what's safe for you might be different. So how do you navigate that if that's the one that you're using? The one that we use, because it fits best with our way of thinking and our dynamic, I suppose, is RAC, risk aware consensual kink. So you are availing yourself of information about the risks, you are understanding what those risks are, and you are making an informed decision to consent or not in that particular activity. And then there's another model which I think is more recent, of Fry's,
which is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, specific. That one I always have to think at least twice for, which is a more general consent model than just kink. And there was also prick as well, which we enjoy the name of. And it's a good model as well, because that's personal responsibility informed consensual kink.
Yes.
Which is also really good. I have a leaning to enjoying rack. I prefer rack, I think.
Yeah. And leads to some fun conversations where you will say, that's not very rack of you, and I will say, I'm aware of the risks, I just don't care.
Yes. Which, of course, is a joke.
Is it, for legal reasons, is a joke. Yes.
And you say that to me sometimes when I start asking about giant hogweed.
Yes, I do. Well, no, that's not what I say when you start talking about giant hogweed. What I say is, no! That's what I say.
Fair. So consent is obviously important in every type of intimacy, in every type of relationship, whether that's vanilla, kinky, somewhere in between. Consent is always really, really essential and really enjoyable as well, which I think sometimes gets sort of lost in the talk about how big and important it is. Like, making sure that your partner is really, really wanting what's happening can often be a really pleasurable part of intimacy as well. Where kink starts to deviate a little bit from the norm is that how consent looks, how consent is navigated, as well as being more complex, potentially more risky, potentially more specific. It can also be performed in a different way. So, for example, especially when we're talking about CNC, enthusiastic may not be as important or may look very different. So much as I will be very enthusiastic about negotiating play or a dynamic with someone where CNC is going to be a part of it, when it actually comes to the moment of play or sex, when it's in a CNC context, I might not appear to be enthusiastic. I may even not feel particularly enthusiastic, because a lot of what I look for from kink is to be pushed and to experience things that I don't actually want in the moment, because I want the feeling of having done that afterwards, which is a little bit hard to explain.
Yeah. You want to not want it.
Yeah.
And you want to not enjoy it.
Yes.
I think in the moment.
Yeah.
I think is a lot of where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when we're playing in styles that aren't as sort of overtly CNC, a lot of my submission, I like to be instructed, I like to be led. So that can again look a little bit different. So I might be very much saying yes and very willing and happy and enjoying what I'm doing. There's still that difference between that and how a vanilla encounter would go. Because if you're telling me, now do this, now do that, now bend over, I don't have as much apparent agency in that moment. It's not a two-way conversation, it's a set of instructions. So even at the lighter end of how we play, I would say that consent from an outside perspective, like if you're a fly on a wall, looks very, very different from a typical vanilla sexual encounter.
No, I would agree. And I think timing is the thing. I read an amazing thing writing on FetLife a little while ago, where the person was basically saying, and I think you've said similar in the past when we've talked about it, I want my consent to be as far away from the moment as possible.
Yes.
Not to diminish its responsibility, but I want to negotiate at this point, and then everything from that point, we don't. It's like we put it away. We've done it. We don't think about it. We just do the stuff. Yeah.
And there are ways that consent, just for safety, sometimes has to be ongoing, has to be revisited, has to be talked about again. But yeah, absolutely. I read that writing as well and related to it a lot. And there were things in that writing that I'd literally said word for word before. That's exactly how I feel about my consent. Yeah, I know that my consent is really important, but for me personally, I don't find my own consent enjoyable. Other people's, yes, I love seeing enthusiasm and desire in a partner, but my consent turns me off. So I need that distance from it to really enjoy what I'm doing. And sometimes that just means I will follow the instructions that I'm given. Sometimes that means I will perform sort of resistance or reluctance or distress as part of a role play to heighten the enjoyment for both of us. Sometimes that means I actually want to be pushed to the point where I'm having a terrible time, but still feel safe within that, because I know that it's only going to happen within the parameters that we've agreed. But that conversation, I have both like distance through time and emotional distance from, where I don't have it sitting on the surface of my brain.
Yeah. You can just kind of go into whatever is happening and go with it and be kind of taken along by me, mostly.
Yeah.
By what is happening around you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot about it that serves a lot of different needs for me. Some of it is just that I find it hot. I just find sort of experiencing humiliation and experiencing a controlled state of violation to be really hot. But also it's that sort of freedom from responsibility is a big part of it for me, where growing up with a lot of sexual shame, the idea of actively seeking, actively consenting to, actively participating in anything sexual was quite scary and felt like quite a big barrier. That sort of abdication from that. Like, what's happening is none of my business. It's just going to happen whether I like it or not, whether I participate or not. It's going to happen. Frees me from a lot of that baggage and allows me to be a lot more present. And experiencing really intense feelings that would be considered negative. So shame, fear, humiliation, all of that. And having a big cry and having a big scream and having, sometimes physical resistance, all of that is a great outlet for just dumping all of the stuff that brains kind of do on their own. Any kind of negative stuff that's building up in there, it's like a pressure release. So there's a lot of different ways that works for me. But the thing that I have found over my life consistently does not work for me is feeling the presence of my consent too actively when I'm intimate. If that's too close, I come out of my head. It's like there's only space for one of us at a time. If the consent's in there, I'm not, and I'm sort of there multitasking with 15 different thoughts at once and not present, not enjoying it. So actually, for me to enjoy it, what I need is to not enjoy it.
And that's valid. No, I appreciate that about you a lot, because it means I get to be very, very mean to you, and you have a good time. Well, you have an awful time, and then you have a good time. Sometimes at the same time. It's fascinating. That whole thing, and I think it's probably something we'll come back to later. That whole thing of how the bottom or the submissive person's mind is working in that moment is just fascinating to me. It's just, it blows my mind because I don't have that mindset, because I don't have that inclination, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to fully empathize with that. You can explain it to me and you can do all of that stuff, which is really helpful. But I just think that kind of contradiction is really fascinating.
Yeah.
That kind of, I really enjoy not enjoying it.
Yeah.
Just
it's one of those things, if it's not for you, it's never going to be for you, and nor should it be. Like, no one should ever push themselves to do this style of play if it doesn't appeal to them, if it doesn't really draw them the way that it draws me.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a guaranteed way to really fuck yourself up, to be honest. This is something that both or all people involved in have to really, at some deep level, actively want. I think there's some kinks that you can sort of experiment with a little bit, even if it's not really your thing. So, like, for example, I'm not into wet and messy sploshing.
Yeah.
But years and years ago, I did, I spent a summer making wet and messy content because I was getting paid to do it, and it was a good laugh, and it's not my kink, but I still enjoyed it. That's a harmless enough thing that you can just do that. I think CNC, it delves into such messy places in your head that unless you actively want it, it's probably best to keep some distance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or tread very, very,
very lightly.
Very lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. What I wanted to ask you, that while we were talking about that, I suddenly thought of. I obviously mentioned that I don't enjoy my own consent. I find it a turn off, but I really want to see my partner's active enjoyment of what we're doing. When you are doing kink or having sex or any kind of intimacy with someone like me who prefers things to have a kind of non-consensual vibe to them, do you feel like you lose that at all, Nix? Do you sort of feel that you're missing out on seeing my enthusiasm, I guess?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I know, right?
That's wow. Get you on the news. Hard-hitting questions. No, I don't think it does take away from it. I mean, obviously, it's great to see you enthusiastic when we're doing. Well, it's just great to see you being enthusiastic. That's always lush to see. If we're doing kinky thing and you are enthusiastic about it, that's great as well.
Yeah,
because we do a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
Where you are. We there's like variations on it. You're enjoying it, you're enjoying not enjoying it, you're not enjoying it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That kind of spectrum. So seeing the stuff that we do, the way you are actively enjoying it, is great. But I don't think that is missing when you are resisting and having a bad time.
Yeah.
I think that probably scratches a slightly different part of my brain.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, there is still that knowledge in the back of my head that you are consenting to it.
Yeah.
That at some point you have been enthusiastic in your, yes, let's do this unhinged thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is important. You actually do want what is happening to you, even if you're performing like you don't, or even if you're having a genuinely terrible time. Actually, we've talked about this, that is what you want. But I don't think I'm missing out on anything because you're not kind of fully communicating that you're into it in that moment.
Yeah.
I guess part of it, that's the point. That's kind of hot in itself.
Yeah.
Because I am a filthy sex pervert. That really turns me on.
Yeah.
and I enjoy that aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
So.
No, that makes sense. I think because I never have an experience with you where you're not clearly enjoying it and really attracted to me and expressing that. If I was in a position where you suddenly acted like you didn't want to have sex with me, I'd be really upset.
Yeah.
But we have different roles and you're getting something different from that. It makes sense that I wouldn't get the benefits of that. I would only get the downside of, well, why don't you want me?
Yeah. I think it would be different if we were in a different context. So our context is a 24/7 total power exchange, free use dynamic.
Yeah.
So I can essentially, within the agreed limits and within the scope of our contract and our rules and all of the stuff that we've talked about, I can do what I want, when I want, how I want.
Yes.
And that's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
And I
love that too, the constant threat.
So within that context, that worry about you not being enthusiastic if I want to fuck you isn't an issue.
Yeah.
It's not the whole point, but that's
a point.
That's a part of it. If it wasn't a 24/7 total power exchange reuse type of dynamic, I think it might be a little bit harder to deal with, I suppose. But then our approach to it would be different. Outside of that context, I probably would feel it. I probably would have that little, really ever very enthusiastic when we have sex.
Yeah, it can cross over really easily from like a spicy fantasy into just feeling rejected.
Yeah. And I don't know how that would, because that's not really been a feature of our relationship. I think we've taken time to get to the point that we are. But I think a lot of the stuff that we've done has always had that kind of vaguely CNC type of vibe.
It's definitely got a little bit of the flavour, even if we're not fully going for it. Yeah. I think I would imagine as well, now we're talking about this, it probably helps a little bit that outside of the context of me sort of putting up some resistance in certain types of play, I am just drooling over you all the time.
There is that. You are
not a moment's peace in your life.
Constantly feral.
Yeah.
You're constantly horny. So I never feel not desired. Which is, we joke about it, but that's probably a really important part of it, is that I get those cues from you in so many other ways.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not as important rather than doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That was a very good question. I enjoyed that. Well done.
Thank you.
So we've talked a lot about, we've said the word CNC and consensual non-consent quite a lot so far. We should probably talk about what that might mean then, and what it might include. It's a really broad term, covering a whole range of different styles of play, different styles of dynamic, different levels of intensity.
Yep.
Different ways of playing with it as well.
Because I think there's a really common misconception that CNC just means rape role play scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that is because of censorship on social media has been an element of it, so people can't talk about rape play. So they use CNC instead because they can say that. Sometimes it's about people being mindful about not using language that can be triggering or just very sort of shocking. If you're not expecting to hear someone using the word rape in conversation, it can really slap you in the face. So people start using CNC as a sort of polite way of saying that. But then you kind of lose the picture of what the rest of it is as well, because there's a lot of other things that would fall within CNC that aren't just that one. Yeah,
and it's such a fascinating idea because it's so scalable.
Yeah.
It's gonna make me laugh every time I say that word.
The reason we laugh whenever we say scalable is because we were doing a public waterboarding scene at the kinky camping trip we went to recently.
Mm-hmm.
And we got quite a few people watching, as will happen if you do something interesting in a public place. And people were asking some questions. We ended up talking a lot about scalability.
Yeah.
About how you can modify the length of the pause, the amount of fabric over the person's face, the elements of other things that are going on or not going on in the scene. All of that affects how intense it can feel and how risky it can be. And just someone sort of standing behind you going, scalability, just stuck in your head.
Yes.
And now the word is ruined.
Yes. Yes. But it was also the kind of the tone of voice that person has.
Yeah.
Is just really appealing. When they said it, it's like scalability. That's what I hear whenever that word comes up in any context now. So shout out to them for that. But it is really
scalable.
It is really scalable. Anything at one end of the scale is a relative, almost vanilla idea of just being thrown around the bedroom a little bit. And, really, rough sex kind of thing kind of plays into that non-consensual kind of fantasy.
Yeah.
Or when people talk about consensual non-consent, that can include, that kind of rough sex can include performed distress or actual distress, depending on what you're doing. But it also covers some of the things that we were just talking about before, like the nature of our dynamic, a 24/7 total power exchange, free use dynamic. Total power exchange and free use are kind of forms of consensual non-consent as well.
I think free use is one that gets overlooked a lot because free use can often include absolutely no sort of distress or resistance. You could have an agreement with a partner that either all of the time or within sort of certain boundaries. So you might say at weekends we do free use, for example.
Yeah.
But within that time, one person is the one who can initiate. and within any agreed boundaries and limits will get whatever they want from the other person. But that doesn't mean that that the person receiving that has to resist or say no or get upset or anything. It means basically like it's an agreement to be up for it.
Yeah.
So you could have completely vanilla, gentle, loving sex in a free use context.
Yeah.
With no other elements brought into it. And I would still say that falls under the CNC umbrella. It's at the lightest end of it. But it's a modified version of consent where you are agreeing not to say no, and you may well have a safe word and some kind of out from that if there's a real discomfort with it in the moment.
Yeah.
But you've agreed that barring some kind of change in circumstances, no is not on the table as an option.
Yeah.
Where in normal life, obviously it is.
Yeah.
So it's still modifying the consent. And I think it's a hard thing to define, but CNC for me is where you modify the normal rules of consent so that some of them are not going to apply within an agreed context.
Yeah. And it's a very, very eloquent way of putting it. And that would apply, we describe our dynamic as total power exchange. Some people might describe it as a master-slave or mistress-slave type dynamic, where your whole role is around following instructions and doing as you're told and performing for your dominant.
Yeah, and a crucial part of it is that I have surrendered a lot of my rights to say no to things. So not just sex, not just play, but to orders, to rules, to instructions.
Yeah.
And although how that generally typically would work in our day-to-day lives is things like new rules, we would talk about them.
Yeah.
If you give me an instruction, I have agreed, I have consented, we have negotiated that I will follow that.
Yeah.
And I'll be in trouble if I don't.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have given up my right to say no to and my right to revoke.
Yeah.
So that makes the dynamic a CNC dynamic because of those elements of consent that I've voluntarily given up and said I don't need access to that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And even within that context, there are still some guardrails, aren't there? About I can't, part of my responsibility in our dynamic is not to do things that would harm your career, harm your relationships with your family and friends, put you in danger of contact with criminal justice system, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
So if you gave me an order to go and strip naked in the street and go running up to people and asking if I could buy drugs off them, for example.
Yes.
That would be a problem. It would cause problems in my life. And so I do not have to do that.
No, yeah, that would. I think the kids would call that a red flag.
Yeah, I think so. Not very rack of you.
Not very rack. No, not at all. I'm aware of the risk.
I think a couple of interesting ones that get overlooked with the CNC umbrella as well is interrogation play. Is one which, again, might not involve any kind of sexual elements, any kind of performed sexual assault, but is still very much the person who is having things done to them is having a bad time and performing that they're having a bad time and expressing that they're having a bad time. But that the only way they can kind of make things stop typically would be to give up the information that they're being interrogated for, rather than saying, no, I don't like this, I'm not having a good time. Because that's the point. And also sleep play of various levels. And this is something that is even quite common in vanilla relationships, is sort of pre-negotiating things like waking your partner up with oral sex. Definitely shouldn't be done without any prior negotiation. But some people will say, like, yeah, you can do that any morning you like, and they'll enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah.
It is technically a part of CNC, even though the consent is there, because again, that's what the first C is for. Because while you're actually asleep, until the moment you wake up, you're not able to revoke consent. The first point where you can say, actually, no, I'm not in the mood for this, is when you wake up, when it's already happening.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is agreeing to modify that reversible element of the consent to say there's going to be a portion of this where I physically can't, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I would say like any kind of play involving alcohol or drugs falls under that as well.
Yeah.
Which again is very, very common for people to go, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get drunk, and I'm going to pull. And I think we're starting to, as a society, talk a little bit more about the ethical stickiness of that. But what that has led to is some people taking the very hardline position that you absolutely cannot consent if there's any alcohol or drugs in your system. Kind of being in conflict with people who go, but I like to have a couple of drinks before I go out on the pull because it gives me more confidence and it loosens me up and makes it easy to talk to people.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get those two positions to find any kind of common ground because they don't have any.
Yeah.
And the place where I sit with it is intoxication play is consensual non-consent play. Whether you are pre-negotiating with someone sober, whether you're making a decision in yourself that I'm going to have a couple of drinks before I make these decisions and I'm going to accept that tipsy me is allowed to make their own choices.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, however you navigate that, it comes under the CNC umbrella because because consent is being complicated by that to some degree.
Yeah, true. And I think it's one of those types of play which is probably trickier for me to navigate that as a top.
Yeah.
Because, and this, I suppose there's two sides to it. There is specifically, you are going to get drunk or you're going to get in some way intoxicated. And then I'm going to do all manner of fucked up things to you. That's a scene that we would plan.
Yeah.
A scene we do plan on a pretty regular basis. Versus if we hadn't talked about it and we were just on a night out and you got really, really drunk, the way that I would respond either to that kind of independently or to your advances to me, might be different.
Yeah.
Kind of that sits in a really, even within our dynamic, that sits in a really kind of tricky grey area for me about how I feel about myself as a person.
That's valid. Yeah.
I suppose in that situation. So like we've done specific things where we knew you were going to get drunk or you were going to have some poppers.
Yeah.
Which are mind altering.
Yeah.
Both mind altering substances. And then we would do some stuff, do some kinky sex or do some kinky things.
Yes.
To you.
And it's a good time.
And it's a great time. Really, really enjoy it. But in my head, I would struggle with that a little bit more if it just came up spontaneously, even within our dynamic.
Yeah.
Because it really is kind of blurring the lines of your ability to consent.
Yes, even though in our dynamic we agreed that I have given up the right to revoke consent. When I'm not intoxicated, I have the ability to communicate distress, which you can then use to make decisions.
Yes.
Which is really important.
Yeah.
I would definitely be okay with you initiating things when I'm drunk because that's hot. But I can completely understand from your perspective that wariness of it. And this is one of the things with consent and with risk profiles is that everyone is involved in that. It's not just about what am I willing to let you do to me. It's also about what are you willing to do to me.
Yeah.
And just because I might say you can do absolutely anything you want to me doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. It doesn't mean you have to be comfortable with it. It doesn't mean your consent isn't important.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to realise that dominants, sadists, tops, anyone on that side of the slash can have their own limits. They can have things they are not willing to do, lines they're not willing to cross, things that they might like the idea of in a fantasy, but in reality they wouldn't be comfortable with themselves for having done.
Yeah.
Because of some of the things that I'm into and because my limits are quite far out. I've encountered that a lot with people that I've dated and people that I've played with, that we will come up against their limits before mine. And I don't think that's a bad thing, and I don't think it's even that uncommon.
No.
It's very, very common, especially for dominants, to have like a sort of lower risk threshold than submissives. And we sort of joke about this a lot, the whole like stereotype of the dominant like pushing a submissive into doing horrible things, when actually the most common thing that we see in kink dynamics is the submissive being like, just hit me with your car, and the dominant being like, no. It does seem to be a pattern.
Yeah.
And that's why everyone's consent and everyone's involvement in discussing risk is so important, because it's not just about one person, it's about everybody.
Yeah. And I think the point that I was struggling to make and that you made so beautifully was exactly that, about kind of your ability to communicate your distress to me.
Yeah.
In that situation. So we have a dynamic which doesn't have, unless we're playing in a public venue, we have a dynamic where we don't have you don't use safe words.
Yeah.
You use all of your other words.
Yeah.
To communicate how you're doing, and I have the right to make a decision based on that.
Yeah. Which is again part of that thing for me of enjoying a little bit of distance from my consent, but it doesn't negate the importance of communication and for you to be a responsible human with how you use that power.
Yeah. Which again is another variation on consensual non-consent.
Yeah.
Is you can say, actually, you don't have access to safe words, but you have access to the rest of your words.
Yeah.
And I do with that information as I see fit. When you are intoxicated, it's harder for me to rely on those words.
Yeah, definitely.
So my risk profile shifts.
Yeah. And there's definitely more risk with if we did anything when you were intoxicated.
Yeah.
Even in a very established relationship where consent is really clear, everything's negotiated sober. If one person takes on a role in kink where they are hitting the other person, restricting the other person's breathing, restraining the other person, it becomes very, very dangerous when that person is not completely sober doing those things.
Yeah. And I have a really hard line about there is quite a lot that we do in our day-to-day kinky life that I will never do.
Yeah.
When I'm not even when I'm drunk, if I've had a drink.
Yeah.
As opposed to being drunk.
Yeah.
because I couldn't cope with it.
No.
That's not to say that we don't do anything when I have had a few drinks, but the menu of things is a lot shorter.
Sort of, it's kind of like driving under the influence.
Yeah.
You wouldn't operate in a car drunk or even after a couple of drinks, where you're also not going to put a bag on my head while you've had drinks, or make me bleed.
No.
Things that might go wrong. You need to have a clear head for.
Yeah.
Slapping me around a little bit is
fine.
It's fine. Getting drunk and slapping your partner around is fine.
It's
fine.
Yes.
With consent.
With consent. For legal reasons. Yeah, so I think what we've established is that, the idea of consensual non-consent is really, really broad and covers an awful lot of different things, including some things that you might not typically think of as being consensually non-consensual.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've mentioned it but haven't really kind of talked about a lot is rape play. I know you have some quite strong views about how we use words in this context.
I do. So I am definitely as guilty as anybody of censoring for social media, because I have to. I primarily post content on TikTok, which is the most censored social media platform at the moment, though Meta is doing their best to catch up. But in general, I try to avoid using CNC as a euphemism. It's a really useful umbrella term. It is a useful way of talking about the ways that these different kinks interact with each other. But using it when I want to say rape play is a form of censorship that I'm trying to unlearn and trying not to do as much, because they're not interchangeable. All rape play is CNC, but not all CNC is rape play. I think it's really important for me and for vetting partners to do this kind of play with. Obviously, with the relationship that we're in, I'm only doing that with you, but when I was single, I was also doing that kind of play with other people. And one of the qualities that I look for in someone to do that style of play with is for them to have enough comfort and confidence with the fantasies that they have to name it.
Yeah.
I find that quite important, because if someone's not able to say the word rape, I don't feel like they are in a psychological position to go into an environment where they are having to roleplay as a rapist.
Yeah.
Or as a rape victim. I don't think you are mentally prepared for the intensity of that kind of scene if you have active triggers around that you haven't overcome.
Yeah.
I think once you have overcome triggers, if you have trauma around those kind of things, if you have a lot of fears around those kind of things, once you're at a point of stability, it can enable further healing. And I know people do use it as a form of sort of not therapy, but like adjacent to therapy. And I definitely do find it therapeutic at times, and certainly very cathartic. But I think going into it unhealed is very risky. So that's a red flag is a strong word for it for me, but it would give me pause if someone wanted to engage in that kind of play but couldn't use a word like that.
Right. I think I would tend to agree. I think I'm always a big fan of like using the words and being really clear in the way that you're communicating. I suppose for me, context matters. So if what you're talking about is you get to the point where you are negotiating one-on-one with someone about a potential rape play scene, then they need to be able to say the words, and they need to be able to talk about that in a comfortable and confident way. I guess one of the reasons why people might use CNC when talking about it in a broader context is because it is a triggering word. Yeah. And actually, there's a nod there, isn't there, to if you're communicating with the world through social media. Yeah. Those social media which are not censored, so FetLife, essentially. How you use your language so that you're not having a negative impact on people. I can see that, why people would do it in that context. Yeah. But you're right, if you're going to talk about doing, whether it's rape play or anything really, you've got to be able to talk completely openly about it, because you're having the conversation for a reason. Yeah. You're both into the idea of it, or you wouldn't be talking about it. Yeah. And I think if what you're talking about is rape play, using another term to sort of sanitize it and then continuing to talk about it is probably not actually going to prevent it being triggering to people. Yeah. If they are triggered by that concept, then there maybe needs to be a better way of navigating that, whether that's people using some kind of content warning on their posts. Maybe it's putting something on their profile like, this is a kink I have and I talk about frequently, which is the approach I take. Any kinks that I have are going to get posted here. Yeah.
Do with that what you will.
Do it, yeah.
There's various ways that you can navigate that. I think if anything, using sort of censored terms and euphemisms can end up making the problem worse. Like I've heard about, because of the way that censorship on TikTok works. The grape emoji is commonly used to mean rape.
Yeah.
Unalive is used to mean die.
Yeah.
PDF file is used to mean paedophile. And those things have started setting up new trauma responses in people, like new trigger responses in people.
Right.
So people getting anxious when they see a PDF file arrive in their emails.
Right.
Because they have childhood sexual abuse trauma. They've been conditioned through TikTok to think of paedophiles as PDF files.
Yeah.
And then they see a PDF file in their emails, and it sounds daft, but that's how brains work.
Right.
So I think sometimes the censorship actually can make things worse and give people more triggers than they had to start with.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is tricky to navigate, because you will get pushback if you seem to be being careless with other people's triggers, and understandably so.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I think part of it as well is, as you say, like it's mainly a focus for me when I'm one-on-one negotiating with someone to plan a scene with them. I want to make sure people are able to like fully commit to that as well. Any kind of scene that I'm doing, but particularly if there's elements of role play in it, which rape play is definitely role play. You know, if you're doing it consensually, it's not real rape, therefore it's role play. You might be more or less playing yourself, but it's a version of yourself doing a thing that you would never do.
Yeah, yeah.
And in a position that you would hope never to be in, from the bottom perspective. So when you're negotiating role play, a big part of that is making sure people are going to be able to perform it skillfully. I am not a particularly skilled role player generally. It's rape play and other forms of CNC is pretty much the only area that I'm good at. I can make a big fuss and say no, but I can't.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm not going to play it being a nurse or a flight attendant or something. I don't have the ability to do that. So part of the ability to engage in it well, I think, means being willing to commit, to be really engaged in it. I think if people are unwilling to refer to it with accurate language, if people are uncomfortable with the word rape, I am not convinced that they're going to be able to create an immersive and believable scene.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because they're trying to sanitize it, and it is a really fucking ugly thing. Like, I'm not gonna pretend it's not. Like, a lot of the kink that I enjoy goes to some really dark, messy places.
Yeah.
From the perspectives of both or all people who are involved in it. It's playing with some of the worst, ugliest parts of human nature, and some of the things that we're most scared of. Again, from both sides. I think, I don't know what's more terrifying, the idea of being a victim or the idea of being a perpetrator, but knowing that we have the potential to be either in us at all times. Is, coming to terms with that is, I think, a really important part of negotiating this type of play, but also negotiating being a human being, realizing that humanity isn't made of good people and monsters, it's made out of people, and all people have those potentials in them. So it gets into some really deep stuff, and I think I need partners for that style of play to be comfortable facing up to that and not trying to hide from it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I can understand, totally see why that's important, and I think that's something that I struggle with, I suppose. Still do sometimes, but definitely did at the start of that kind of recognition that shit, I can do some really quite awful things to this person that I love and care about.
Yeah.
What does that say about me as a person? That's a lot to kind of contend with.
Yeah.
I think when you're new to it.
And I think that's what a lot of people want to understand, is people are maybe they find it a little bit easier to understand my side of it, of wanting to experience sort of the catharsis and the therapeutic elements and all of that. But people ask me a lot what dominants get and what sadists get out of some of the truly awful things that you do to other humans, whether that's rape play, whether that's other types of CNC, whether that's just inflicting violence and control in general.
Yeah.
How does that feel for you, Mix?
God. I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
I knew this was coming in this episode, and we'll probably talk about it in other episodes as well. But it's a really hard thing to put your finger on.
Yeah.
There is something about freedom, I suppose, which sounds terrible when you say it. The freedom to pretend to sexually assault your partner.
Yeah.
is a strange freedom to want or enjoy. But there is that thing of, we are all just people. We are all theoretically capable of being either monsters or angels.
Yeah.
And actually being able to kind of lean into that monster side of things is really exciting and really powerful. and in a way freeing.
Yeah.
I suppose it's that kind of unfiltered, unsanitized version of anybody.
Yeah.
Just taking that out and playing with it a little bit, I think is weirdly cathartic.
Yeah.
It's a very poor analogy, but if you think about the logic that is presented by films like The Purge,
Yeah.
where you just need one day to just go absolutely mental and kill some people, and then you're all right for the rest of the year. It's almost that kind of thing. So this is my space to just be an awful human being.
Yeah.
With someone that I trust. And like enjoy that moment of release and power, which just makes me sound like an awful human being.
No, because when you explain it like that, I feel like I relate to it really strongly, even though it's a different thing that I'm getting out and playing with. I think a lot of kink for me centers around there are places in my head that are scary to go to.
Yeah.
And those are the places where I feel like I have low worth, or the places where I have memories of really bad things happening to me, or the places of me feeling a deep sense of shame. And I sometimes I need to look at those places so that their existence doesn't ruin my life. And as we've both said, everyone does have potential to do awful things, and I can imagine people listening to this and being defensive and being like, I don't have a potential rapist in me, I don't have a potential murderer in me. And it's like, but people do have a lot of really terrible potential in them.
Yeah.
People can be swayed and go from being your nice next door neighbor to doing something horrific. And that is a part of human nature. It's a part of human nature that we try to manage and control and tame, and we have morals and we have values and we have connection to other people and we have responsibilities and all this stuff that manages that. But it doesn't get rid of the part of us that all of us to some extent will have moments where we want to see someone else in pain, and we don't like to name that, we don't like to acknowledge it, but we will have a falling out with someone and vividly picture them getting into a car accident, you know, and we won't say it, but we'll think it. And if you don't get those things out of your head and look at them in some way or another, they are bigger and scarier. So we have to, and it seems like that's something that you have tethered to your kink in a way.
Yeah, I think so. But there are, because, you know, as we've said, because CNC is such a broad thing, I get different things out of different aspects of it. The total power exchange dynamic that we have, that isn't about me being an awful person. That's about me kind of having control. And actually just feeling powerful. Because I can tell you to do stuff and you will do it, and you almost always do. In fact, you always do. It's ridiculous how obedient you are, and that's just, I get a real kick out of that. You know, knowing that I could tell you to do something and you will. And it's one of those things. It's so pervasive in our life together. I don't necessarily kind of get actively turned on by it, but you do get that little bit of a thrill out of it, and so it's kind of that feeling of power, I suppose. In that context.
Which again is, I think, one of those things that most people will have elements of their life where they want to take a little bit of power, where they want some control, where they feel like they don't have enough power, or they want a way of other people recognizing the power that they do have. Really normal psychological thing. That you've just tethered to your kink in a way that is maybe less typical. Typical within kink, but not typical for the general average population. But when you put it in those terms, it makes a lot of sense. Because I get people asking me these questions, and it's like, I can't answer them because I haven't got a fucking clue what it feels like for a dominant. Like, we can have these conversations and it's really interesting, but I wouldn't enjoy the things that you enjoy, even though certain things are like human constants, like being scared of your own sort of negative potential and wanting to feel elements of control. Like, I experience those emotions, but they don't drain into kink for me. They drain elsewhere. And the things that do feed into my kink are different things, no less universal. No,
that's fair. And there's so many layers to it. So we're talking specifically today about consensual non-consent and that aspect of our dynamic. So the feelings, like the stuff that I get out of that is like kind of freedom to be awful, and feelings of power and control, other elements of our dynamic, which we will talk about in other episodes, no doubt. I get different things from them. And I think one of the things that I have discovered while we've been exploring this is I do just really enjoy a bit of a fight.
Yeah.
when we're having sex, when we're doing kind of rape play type things. I do enjoy that kind of little bit of struggle and almost making me work for it a little bit. But I don't think we've necessarily pushed all that hard on that so far.
Yeah.
Because that aspect of it is still relatively new to me, but it's really exciting.
Yeah.
That kind of, I'm going to fuck you now whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. While still in the back of my head, there is that reminder. They do. They do, though.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Fighting's always an interesting one because the reason I probably don't fight as hard as I could, partly because it's new to you and we're ramping up, but also is that terror of what if I win?
Yeah. That is a genuine fear for me as well.
Like, if I manage to get away or put up enough resistance that they're not in the mood anymore, then I don't get sex.
Yeah.
Which really kind of goes to prove how consensual it is. That right in the midst of it, I'm like, yeah, but I don't want them to actually stop.
You don't want to actually fight off your attacker.
No. That would be terrible.
That'd be terrible. But that is, genuinely, that is a worry that I have as well. You kind of take it out of a CNC context just for a moment. There's quite a lot of people on around and about in our kink scene who enjoy primal play, which includes things like wrestling and play fighting and stuff like that. And I just think it sounds fascinating, but I just think I would be really bad at it because I'm not actually, for being 6'5", I don't feel like I'm actually that strong. I'm probably a bit stronger than I think I am.
Yeah, you're definitely stronger than me. It's more like if I managed to get my thumbnail into your eye or something, like we're probably not going to have sex that night.
Makes me chuckle sometimes.
Yeah.
Crikey, what if I lose? Does that mean they get to rape me?
I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Just anxious bottom, just standing there like, what?
No, what do I do now? Oh no.
But it opens up like how much more negotiation can be needed, because as well as this then needing to establish what my limits are for how hard you can hit me and what width, we also need to ask the same question for you.
Yeah.
Like, is it a hard limit if I punch you in the face? It suddenly becomes like a whole other level of negotiating. Which is part of what I like about this stuff, as well as just it's sex for giant nerds, really, isn't it? It's like, how can we make this as overly complicated as possible?
Yeah. Oh, you're right. And talking about kind of hitting you as hard as you can, I think a really interesting CNC thing we've done recently is the unhinged whipping at camping.
Yeah.
Where I think that was probably the first time we've done impact where we had a specific aim of not stopping, regardless of how you were responding.
Definitely, yeah. We've done impact play where we accepted that I was going to get to a state of genuine distress and that I might involuntarily say no, because that's sometimes my panic response if something hurts a lot, is be like, no. But if I've told you that in advance, even if we didn't have the dynamic we have, if I've warned you that might slip out, it's okay to ignore.
Yeah.
But we've never set out with the goal of, we're not only going to get me to the point of really genuine distress, but you are not going to use that distress to inform your decisions on whether or not to continue. We are committing that you're going to, as long as you're still comfortable, it continues until you're done.
Yeah.
Which was definitely more challenging for both of us, I think, but also more rewarding.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the context for that probably really helped as well, is that we knew going into it how long it needed to be.
Yeah.
I suppose what's the way that we top that is by it being open-ended.
Yeah.
And actually we stop when I've had enough.
Yeah.
Whereas with the what we did at Kinky Camping was we knew going in there was a set number of times you were going to get hit.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to stop until we had done that.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you were responding.
Yeah.
But it was just a really interesting variation on CNC. I don't think we'd done impact in that way.
Yeah.
Before. Which just goes back to what we were saying earlier on. CNC can be anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's, for me, to sort of really pursue that line of wanting to experience genuine distress and suffering, impact or some other form of like pain play is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Because rape play, there is always an element of acting for me, because I am always up for getting some of your dick. Let's be honest.
That's fair.
And also because there's a limit to how much distress you can cause me with that when you are my partner who I am consenting to having sex with. Like, unless it was an actual consent violation, which obviously it is not. because of the first scene. It's never going to push me physically or psychologically to a point of breaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, unless you did something that was causing me some kind of horrible internal injury, which is a whole other problem. Where with impact or with other forms of sadism, you can take me to my pain threshold and then past it. And if we've negotiated that and talked about what limits we want to set around it, that gives us a lot more scope to play in that zone of genuine suffering and distress, which is something that fascinates me and that I want to explore more. It's scary because I know I'm going to have a terrible time, but it's that thing of finding out who I am within it and who I am on the other side of it is something that just really calls to me.
No, I can see that. It's interesting what you say about kind of there's a limit to how realistic a rape play scene can be for you because you know it's me, you know that you've consented to this. Because there was that one time we did a rape play where I put the gas mask on. And I think we talked about it afterwards, but like for me, that provided some separation as well. Just that thing of putting the gas mask on, coming in, fucking you. And then I think I kicked you.
You did?
I kicked you as well. And then just left. Kind of thing. Probably had a greater impact on me for how it felt than some of the other times that we've done it where I've probably been rougher, and I was pretty rough, to be fair. But that kind of separation of you're assuming it's me kind of thing was, for me anyway, it was really hot.
It was really hot. I think it probably didn't alter my headspace as much as it did yours. I'm really glad it worked so well for you. I found it really hot, but I definitely did know it was you because you have several identifying tattoos.
That is true.
And I'm quite familiar with your cock. I definitely still had, like, anytime we do spontaneous rape play, there's the moment where you pull the covers off me if I'm in bed, whatever your like entry into the scene is, where I have to catch my face and arrange it correctly because my first instinct is to grin like, yeah, I'm gonna get some. I'm like, no, you're really upset about this. So I think it's a funny one where obviously like both of us are performing. Like, you are not a rapist, and I am not up for it. Like, I am definitely always very willing. So we're both acting to an extent. Yours is a shift from your actual morality and values to like evil S. Where mine is a change between how I'm acting and how I'm actually feeling, because I'm always turned on by it. So it's quite a big step. But I think one of the many misconceptions about CNC, and particularly around rape play, is that it has any kind of crossover with real abuse and real rape. I'm obviously not saying that there are no people who are into CNC who have ever sexually assaulted someone, unfortunately. Predators are all over the place.
Predators gonna predate.
But I haven't seen any evidence, sort of anecdotally or studied, that there's any indication that there's a real correlation there. If anything, I would say that the amount of work that goes into finding someone willing to do consensual non-consent play with you, negotiating a scene, finding a private enough environment to do it in where the neighbours aren't going to hear and call the police, and then play acting your way through it, is a hell of a lot more work than just going out and sexually assaulting somebody would be. Like, if people are wanting to actually be a predator, there are much more straightforward ways to do it than going through all of that. It's totally different, and the amount of conversations that go on about consent with something like this puts it, to me, a long way away from any kind of blurred lines around consent and actual non-consensual behaviour.
I don't know how to respond to that other than I agree completely.
That is also a good response.
I think you're right, because it's that taking the power out of it. Isn't it? Is kind of the point. Taking the actual evilness out of that situation, because you are so conscious and deliberate about the setup and how it's going to work and what you're going to do afterwards and how you're going to care for each other if you need to. And it takes a lot of thinking to maintain that illusion. So I think you're right. If you actually wanted to sexually assault someone, that is, CNC is not the way to do it.
No.
Why would you?
Why would you?
Why would you go to the effort?
And my experience of people who top for CNC scenes is universally they are people, and again, it's just in my experience, it's not everyone, but everyone that I've done this kind of play with has been so cautious about consent, so kind of protective of me, more worried about my limits and my sort of psychological safety than I am. And that's not to say that I'm reckless with my safety at all, but I'm pretty confident of where my limits are.
Yeah.
Particularly when I've done this as a sort of one-off hookup with near strangers, which is one of the riskier ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
People that I've spoken to and people that I've actually played with who I've met through that kind of route are so cautious about not including too much in a scene and not pushing things too far, partly because of a genuine value basis for that, where they're wanting to protect my safety, but also to protect themselves, because that puts you in a really vulnerable position.
Yeah.
If you do something like that and take it too far, legally you really don't have a leg to stand on.
No. And I guess that comes down to back to having that really open conversation. You've got to say the words.
Yeah.
You've got to follow through with all of that, when we talk about consent, when we talk about negotiation, let's just use the words of what we're about to do kind of means that there's a relative degree of safety within that context.
Yeah. And I think a really crucial thing to remember is that anything that is consensual is not rape, and anything that is rape is not consensual. There isn't a grey area there. There are a lot of complexities to how consent is negotiated and how consent can be modified, and a lot of debates about what is and isn't ethical. But ultimately, there is a very clear line between rape and consensual sex or consensual anything. So things like rape fantasies, reading about rape in fiction, role-playing rape with a trusted partner, or a complete random stranger off a dating app, none of those things are rape because no one involved in them is not consenting. A fantasy is something that's between you and your own imagination, consensual. Work of fiction, no real people involved. Role-play scenario with a partner, everyone involved wants to be there. However realistic rape play might get, or a rape fantasy might get, it is not real, because the thing that makes it real is when the consent is absent.
Yeah.
I think people get very hung up on what it appears to be, but what it is people creating an illusion because it gets them off.
Yeah.
And you can say that we're sick and that we're perverts, and you'd probably be right, but that doesn't mean that what we're doing has anything in common with real sexual violence.
Yeah, and that's fair. Here. Again, nothing to say.
And I think that much as we talk about, I want to have a little bit of distance from my consent, and we might create an illusion of a lack of consent within a scene, there is ongoing consent, even in a very heavy dynamic like ours, where I have given up a lot of my right to revoke consent, for example, and we play without safe words. The way that ongoing consent still works for us is in the communication.
Yeah.
Something that I think you are very good at, and the reason that I trust you enough to not have a safe word and to remove a lot of those kind of safety rails from our relationship is that you are very good at understanding the difference between suffering and distress because it's kinky and it's hot and because I want to be pushed, and when I need a little bit of gentleness. So one of the rules that we have, for example, is that I have to tell you when I'm ill and specifically what's wrong with me and how different types of play might affect that.
Yeah.
So that you've got a really clear roadmap to make some decisions on what you do or don't want to do to me.
Yeah.
There have been times when you've suggested a scene or a type of play, and I haven't outright said, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's not a right that I want to have. But I have said, this will distress me in these ways, and it will be hard for me to cope with in these ways, and it might have long-lasting impacts, which would be this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And then you are like, well, I'm a responsible human being, so I need to do something with that information.
That happened recently. You were suffering with like a really bad cold and like kind of really chesty cough, and we talked about doing a sensory deprivation with poppers scene. We were like, do you still want to do that? And you were just dead up front that no, actually that would be awful. That doesn't sound like a good time. So can we modify the plan? And that's that's hardly the most extreme thing that we've ever done, but it's that kind of conversation that you have when you've got that, from my perspective, when you've got that level of control and level of power over someone, when you've given up your right to say no and you've given up your right to safe words and stuff like that, it's using all of your other words and being a decent human being about it.
And I think it's about your consent as well. Like, the focus might be more on mine, but also if you've said we're going to do this style of play tonight, and I don't tell you that style of play tonight is going to cause a much more severe level of distress than you planned,
Mm-hmm.
That also puts you in a position where you're going to be in a scene that you hadn't expected. If you were expecting me to just be having a good sort of happy time,
Yeah.
and I'm suddenly coughing and wheezing and crying because I've got a chest infection, you've pumped a load of poppers up my nose.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what you signed up for.
Yeah.
It's me communicating to you, if we do this, this is how I'm feeling about it, this is how it's going to affect me.
Yeah.
And then you being responsible with that and deciding when to push and when to pull back.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's one of the fundamental things in our contract, isn't it? Of I have a responsibility for your health and well-being, notwithstanding the fact that I will make you suffer and cause you distress at times.
Yeah.
I still have that overriding responsibility to protect your health and well-being.
Yeah.
So everything operates within that context.
Yeah.
It's not just a free-for-all.
Yeah.
You know? Because it wouldn't be fun.
No.
I think something that isn't necessarily talked about as much as perhaps it should be is the mental load that this stuff can cause for the dominant or for the top.
Yeah, you have a huge responsibility.
Yeah, and it can be a lot, and I think there's probably lots of aspects to it, but the two that are in my head at the moment are what we just talked about, that kind of responsibility for you as a human being. It's kind of really clearly spelled out in our contract, and it's really clear in all of the kind of the negotiation and communicating that we do, that I am responsible for your well-being.
Yeah.
And everything that we do has to be within that context, which is a big deal. That's a lot to have on your shoulders, to be kind of responsible for two people.
Definitely. I would not want your job.
It's really changed my perspective on kink. I think, I've had dynamics in the past where I had a lot of what felt at the time like a lot of responsibility for another person, but this is on a whole other level. That kind of total power exchange dynamic is a whole other level of responsibility and control that comes, and it can be quite hard work sometimes, and you quite often find myself kind of caught in that just because I can, should I scenario, whether you're ill or not. That kind of, my first instinct when you're not feeling well is to not, because that feels to me like the right thing to do. Thinking about scenes and plays specifically, my instinct is to go, okay, so we won't, or at the very least we'll modify it quite heavily to accommodate for that. I think sometimes in our day-to-day life that is a little bit harder to do. So if you're ill and you have domestic tasks to do, or you are still 20 minutes away from finishing your exercise rig or whatever, that can be a really difficult thing to navigate, because on the one hand, you want to be true to the dynamic and I want to give you the structure and the control that is really important to you with a dynamic like ours. But on the other hand, I just want to wrap a blanket around you and say, come and cuddle on the sofa, I'll make you feel a little better kind of thing. And that kind of, again, it's still that just because I can, should I sort of question.
Yeah, I've definitely seen you grow in confidence over the last few months with that stuff, and that doesn't mean you're now being irresponsible and completely ignoring my well-being. You found a really good balance with it, and I think you're continuing to explore exactly where the line is for you, but started to sort of push me a little bit harder if I am a little bit tired or like not properly sick but a little bit under the weather, and reading my reactions in much more sort of subtle and detailed ways, where you can really ride that line between good distress, bad distress, and really, really bad distress, and take it to where you want to take it. There's been a lot more of the kind of spontaneous things happening as well, where you always used to sort of slap my leg when we were sitting on the couch and stuff sometimes, but now actually just coming downstairs with a horrible rubber strap of some sort and whacking the hell out of me with it for no reason. I'm like, why? It's great.
Because I can.
Because you can, like, really leaning into the fact that actually we have spent hours and hours and hours of our relationship negotiating, and me reassuring you, like, you really can, aside from hard limits and aside from things that would affect my work and my relationships and all that stuff we talked about, you can do whatever you want to me. And I want to be pushed, and sometimes I want to have a bad time. I don't want to be relentlessly having a bad time, but I want that to be a threat every day. I want that to be a possibility. And you have gone, okay, yeah, I can step up, I can do that.
I can do some of that.
Because for a long time at our check-in, I think one of the most common bits of feedback I would give you, apart from I want to do more rate play and I want to have more orgasms, you could be meaner. And it wasn't a criticism at all, because I knew that I had more experience of this type of dynamic coming into it than you. And also early on in our relationship, like, you need time to build up that comfort with understanding each other well and being able to read reactions and things like that. But it was more just to encourage you. It's like, no, what you're doing is good. Keep pushing.
Yeah.
Because you've got a really mean side to you and I love it.
Yeah. And I think, so the other aspect of that is specifically the CNC side of it.
Yeah.
And again, you kind of, if you don't think about it too deeply, you kind of think, well, the top's got the easy job of it because they just have to climb on top and do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. But that's just not true. I defy any dominant to say who's done like consensual non-consent or specifically rape play. I defy any dominant to say they haven't struggled at some point with that.
Yeah.
Because it is tapping into something that is genuinely evil.
Yeah.
You know, that is not something that you should want to do to your part. So goes the thinking in your head.
Yeah.
That is not something that you should want to do to your partner, to someone that you love and to someone that you care for. And doing it was really, really challenging for me. Not necessarily in the moment, but definitely afterwards when we first started doing it. Like, you know, I had to go and kind of sit outside and have a cigarette and stare at some plants for a few minutes to kind of bring myself back down.
Yeah.
From it. And, you know, that applies equally to other types of scene. We've done some, you know, really intense kind of psychological and emotional sadism kind of scenes.
Yeah.
Which is really hard because you just shouldn't say that shit to someone that you love.
Yeah.
You know, that's the narrative that you're contending with as the top in that situation, or the dominant in that situation. It is, you're doing things you know you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You've been trained. They taught you this at school. This isn't okay. The psychological impact of that shouldn't be underestimated. I think so. You know, if you're thinking about getting into playing with consensual non-consent, really think through how that might make you feel and what you're going to do about that.
Yeah.
Afterwards as well.
Because I think we found we had to be really adaptable with aftercare, didn't we? Because sometimes what you need to just be on your own.
Yeah.
Sometimes you needed verbal reassurance. Sometimes you needed a cuddle.
Yeah.
And doing the wrong one of those things could make it worse. So you have to be really sort of adaptable to what you needed in the moment and work with it.
Yeah.
And luckily, my aftercare needs with pretty much anything under the CNC umbrella are quite low.
Mm-hmm.
I think after the whipping was the only time that I've really needed quite intensive aftercare.
Yeah.
But because it was so intense. But generally, stuff like this, I just thrive off it. It's very cathartic and very healing for me, so I just come off it on a proper high.
Yeah.
But that puts me in a good position to provide a lot of aftercare.
Yeah. And you know, I can only speak for myself, but you just talked about kind of how cathartic it is. And for some people who engage in that kind of place, it is cathartic, and it's based on real experiences that they've had.
Yeah.
And it's a way of healing. It's a way of reclaiming power for themselves, or taking power out of the situation, or taking power away from the person who did whatever they did. I don't have that as a reason to do it.
Yeah.
You know, which again is kind of quite difficult to come to terms with. I've never had experience of that in my life.
Yeah.
So it's not that kind of healing, cathartic kind of thing.
Yeah.
So reckoning with the idea that I'm doing it because I want to be evil for 10 minutes is quite heavy.
Yeah.
You know, and you were amazing with it. You know, we kind of we took it at a really steady pace. Came up with plans for how we would approach it, and you've kind of ramped up that intensity as we've gone along.
Yeah.
Kind of, each time you get a little bit more resistant.
Yes.
Which has been a really good way of kind of doing that. And like I say, because of your aftercare needs being different to mine in that situation, it can focus on me a little bit more than perhaps it does normally.
Yeah.
After a really heavy beating where you have a more kind of physical reaction.
Yeah.
That you want cuddles and you want to be wrapped up warm and eat garbages. When I say garbage, I don't mean literal garbage.
No, that would be during the scene.
Yeah, during the scene. Yeah. We order some greasy meats from a kind stranger on the internet.
Yes.
But because that's not so pressing for you, it means that you can take care of me.
Yeah.
If I need it. So yeah, it's a really tricky thing to get your head around. Yeah. Kind of that kind of feeling of guilt. I just did this awful thing. But also kind of shame. What does that say about me as a person? That is a thing that gets me hard.
Yeah.
Is you crying and not wanting what I'm doing to you? What does that tell? What commentary does that make about me?
Which I completely understand as a feeling. I mean, my answer to that would be it makes you a person who's sexually compatible with me, which is handy.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
That's good. Yeah.
But absolutely, like on the surface of it, there's not an easy answer to that of how do you reconcile someone being a good person with someone getting off on the illusion of raping their partner. It's and I know the answer to that because I know you and I have known other people
Yeah.
with that balance. And I think your values show in how you actually treat people, me and others included. I think your values show in the negotiation, in the consent, in the risk management, in all of the things you do to make sure that both of us are safe and supported through it. I think the value of a person shows in how they actually behave, not in the kind of role play and the kind of fantasies they enjoy. I think there's a very clear separation there that I see in you, and that the people that I've chosen to explore all forms of consensual non-consent with in the past have navigated those things as well. That's what I look for. I need to see the green flags. And then I need to see that you can convincingly perform the red ones for me. For my sexual amusement.
Fair. We're just puppets to you. Yeah. No, that's a really good way of kind of framing it, I suppose. And it's taken some time.
Yeah.
We do that we do that kind of thing with increasing frequency and increasing intensity, and compared to where we kind of started, and it's easier to deal with now. It doesn't feel like quite as big a shock to the system now as it did at the start.
It's been a good while since you had any kind of like really noticeable drop from it, which is nice to see.
Yeah, no, you're right.
As I've mentioned, I don't struggle a lot. It's extremely rare that I drop from any form of CNC, and when I do, it's typically something that's involved like a high level of physical violence as well, so things like the whipping where it's more of a physical drop. It's something that seems to mesh really well with my brain and not cause too much trouble, but aftercare is really important for anyone in this kind of play if it's needed, and being able to be adaptable to what's needed. So sometimes I do need a little bit more than other times. It's usually, I think for me, if either I get like a physical drop from being hit really hard, or if I feel like I haven't done a good job, like if I feel like I have either not put on a good performance, or if I feel like I've resisted too much and ended up being inconvenient and difficult in a way that isn't enjoyable, things like that. If I start getting self-critical and worry that I've ruined the scene, that can sometimes trigger a little bit of drop for me, so I can sometimes need to ask for a bit of reassurance, like did I do a good job? Something that I think is really important in general for anyone approaching this kind of play is until you do it, and probably until you do it quite a few times, you won't always know how you're going to react, because sometimes something can not affect you at all for 3, 4, 5, 6 goes at it, and then suddenly you'll get a really bad drop. So being prepared to be adaptable with aftercare. And potentially there is a risk of trauma from this. I would say, especially when you get into stuff that's not just about doing a little bit of role play, that can still potentially trigger things and bring things up, but it's not likely to lay down any new trauma. What I think was something where we talked about a risk of potential real trauma was things like the whipping, where you're doing play where there is potentially no safe word, or there is very limited options for having an out of it, and the goal is really serious, genuine distress. Your brain doesn't necessarily know the difference between doing that consensually and doing that non-consensually. However well you negotiate it, however carefully you plan, there is the risk of that causing actual trauma. Which is something that's been mentioned in a workshop we went to recently. The one about waterboarding talked about how if you are trying to play a game where you make your brain thinking you're having a near-death experience, you do not have control over what your brain does with that experience once you give it to it. So that's something that I try to be really mindful with any kind of intense play that's affecting me really psychologically, is watching for any kind of signs of trauma response afterwards and being prepared to manage them. There's a difference between feeling a little bit sort of drained and emotional after intense play and feeling actually traumatized and shaken. If something feels like it's actually not right, not pressurizing yourself to do too much verbalizing and thinking through as well. My natural instinct after play is let's talk about it. Whether we've had a good reaction, a bad reaction, in between, let's talk about it, because I'm a big big on communication, big
Mhm.
talker. If you are experiencing something that feels like a trauma, overly verbalizing can sometimes do more damage as well. So focusing more on grounding, so things that taste good, things that smell good, comfortable sensations, being warm enough, things like that is going to be more healing than going like, right, we're gonna have a recap of this right now and talk through it. I think well-negotiated CNC, it should generally be possible to avoid a trauma response, but I think it's important to be aware of it as a risk. And as with any high-risk play that we talk about, doing your own research, doing lots of digging, learning from multiple sources, and developing a clear risk profile for yourself before engaging. Because just because I'm like, oh yeah, I can do all of this hardcore CNC and bounce back straight away, does not mean that's a universal experience. Probably not a typical one. I think most people do have quite high aftercare needs after these kind of things. And there's certain kinds of play that I do need more aftercare. It's just this isn't one of them.
Yeah, everybody's different.
Yep.
So you got to work out the plan for yourself and not just two random people on the internet talking at them. So we've talked about quite a lot of different things today.
We have.
All under the banner of consensual non-consent. But we've covered quite a lot of different things. You know, the as is typical, as is becoming typical for our podcast. All of these things are kind of underpinned by really good, open, honest communication.
Yes.
Making sure that we are checking in with each other as we go, and really thinking through the stuff that you want to do. Make sure everybody is up for it and understands the risks and how you're going to deal with it. And protecting your well-being as well, protecting our own kind of health and peace.
Yes.
I suppose just because it sounds really hot doesn't mean we have to do it. A bit like giant hogweed. You know, kind of focusing on what you're both going to get out of it, and making a plan for caring for each other when you do this stuff, because it is really, really intense.
Yeah. Definitely.
It brings up a lot of feelings on both sides of the slash.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably obvious for anyone who is listening to our podcast. Like, this is just how we talk to each other all the time. This is just we give ourselves an outline when we're doing one of these, because otherwise we'll talk about all sorts of random shit. But our day-to-day conversations pretty much sound like this, like the really in-depth, deep conversations about kink, because we both find it fascinating, and we are both giant sex nerds. So we just have to overcomplicate everything and make it as weird as possible, because we're perverts and sex nerds, and that's how we go.
That would have been a great name for the podcast.
Perverts and sex nerds.
Perverts and sex nerds.
I feel like if we had a bigger team, that would be a good name for the podcast. If there was like 8 of us doing it or something.
Yeah.
Perverts and sex nerds would be good.
Yeah.
I think it implies a larger number of people.
That's fair. That's fair.
We need to socialise more.
Oh, never mind that.
Make some more friends.
Never mind. Forget I spoke.
Also, I mean, seeing as we're on the topic of CNC, you do also need to make some more CNC top friends, Mix. Because I have a really specific fantasy that involves at least 9 people.
Oh, good grief. Oh, God. Oh, no. Well, I will put the call out into the ether then. If there are any CNC tops listening to this who would be interested in being friends.
That is not an ethical way to recruit for a gang rape scene. I swear to God. That's not very rack of you.
Not very rack of you. That's another good name for the podcast.
Yeah.
Very rack of you.
I think we should wrap up before we get ourselves in trouble.
Yes, sorry. For legal reasons, that was a joke. Please don't message me if I don't know you. But there we go. Thank you for tuning into Don't Scare the Newbies.
Woo!
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Don't Scare the Newbies.
You can support us on Patreon for bonus content, and head to carizel.com for my blog and links to everywhere else that you can follow me. See you next time.